An army of giant demonic monsters versus one cute Korean girl with a sword. Who wins? We do. The players. That's who wins. These are 20 essential tips you need to know going into Stellar Blade, and the last 3 are must-know details about this game that took me way too long to figure out on my own. Don't forget to like the video, and let's get into it. We're going to alternate between tips for combat and exploration. This first one is all about protecting that pretty face of ours in a fight. Blocking is obviously really important for avoiding damage in this game, and some games in this genre, like Jedi Survivor, will let you block in a 360-degree radius around you. But not Stellar Blade. In this game, you have to be facing the attack that you want to block or parry, otherwise you're getting hit. And that's why I think the auto lock-on is a really important setting. It should be on by default, but you can go into your settings menu and toggle it on or off there. With this on, when you attack an enemy, you'll instantly lock onto it. It'll make tracking the target much easier, and you'll always be facing them to block their attacks. We've come a long way since Z-targeting in Ocarina of Time. But just like in that game, it pays to be destructive. When you're exploring the world of Stellar Blade, you absolutely want to smash everything you possibly can. There's going to be tons of objects that you can destroy, but in the demo specifically, we had these boxes and statues that had random item drops in them. These item drops come in different levels, and sometimes you can get rare nano elements to build more exospines, polymer materials to make new suits, and even some Vitcoins. These items won't show up on the scan until you smash the box or the statue, so make sure you destroy as much as you can, and you can build up a serious item farm. Stellar Blade's genre is kind of hard to pinpoint. It's part Souls-like, part hack and slash, part adventure, and that can make for a bit of an overwhelming first experience. If this is your first game like this, I would recommend playing on story mode just to learn. There's no shame in it. Don't let the internet bullies tell you it's a skill issue if you don't play on normal mode. The goal is to have fun, and there is a learning curve to this game, so try story and work your way up. There's no shame in learning, and it will be a lot more forgiving than normal mode. Players who have tried story mode have said that it's still enough of a challenge without being too easy, so if normal is too hard, try story mode. So I'm slightly ashamed to admit that this one took me too long to figure out, even though the game literally tells you. These yellow marks that you see out in the field are markers that let you know that you can either climb, or jump, or swing on the item that it's marking. Some of them are really obvious, but others are actually pretty well hidden and off the beaten path. They can be found with the scan, but it's still pretty easy to miss them. It really encourages you to slow down and take your time to really explore the map. The exploration in this game is a lot deeper than I first gave it credit for. And there's a lot to find, so really look everywhere for secrets, because you could miss some. And if you ever see these yellow marks in the field, chances are that they lead to some kind of item or treasure, so definitely see where it goes. For this next one, I have an entire video about it, and I recommend you check it out after this one. I'll have it linked below, and you can click on that button in the top right corner. But there's a lot of skills that you can unlock in Stellar Blade, and some are a lot more valuable than others early on. In my opinion, the first skills that everybody should unlock are Focus Boost and Reflex Boost. You should get these 2 skills as soon as possible because they'll improve your perfect parry and your perfect dodge, which in my opinion are the most important abilities you can have in the beginning stages. There's a couple other skills you should consider unlocking too, and I go over all of them in that video. I recommend queuing it up after this one. There's some pretty good stuff in there. Although you might be saying after that last tip, well, I spent all the skill points I had and I don't want to go grind for hours to get more. I respect that. And lucky for us, skill tree resets are a thing in this game. It lets you forget all the skills that you've learned, but it refunds all of your skill points so that you can put them back toward other skills that you didn't have or maybe you haven't tried yet. You do it with an item called an SP Initializer, and you can buy these from the vending machines or the shops for 200 gold. It's really cheap, so pick it up if you want to try some new skills. To actually go along with the skill tree reset, you might be happy to learn that, unlike in other games in this genre, you won't lose your skill points after a death. Most other Souls-like games will have you come back to the spot that you died to get your points back, or you have to hit the enemy that took you out to get the points back, but in Stellar, you just hold on to them. It does remove a little bit of the risk associated with combat, but I think it's a good risk that's being removed. If you're always worried about losing your points, it might actually affect how you play, and you'll probably go into fights a little bit more cautiously, so I would personally rather not even worry about it. If you're concerned about losing your points, don't be. That is not a thing in this game. A cool trend that I see in a lot of these types of action games is a roulette-style enemy, or a rare enemy that doesn't spawn very often, but drops a bunch of good items if you can defeat it when it does spawn, and Stellar Blade has that exact same concept. These little robotic enemies can have rare items in them. This one that we get introduced to in the demo drops a tumbler expansion, an item that makes your healing stims better. I actually missed this little guy the first few times I did the demo section, and maybe some of you did too. Just know that these little buggers are fast, and they try to run away from you, as most of these roulette-style enemies do. So use your rush to catch up to it and take it out quickly. You'll get some nice goodies when you beat it. I talk about this next tip in that skill unlock video that I plugged earlier, but it's still worth going over here. All the monsters and machines that you fight in this game will have a shield meter, and it's really important to get rid of enemy shields as fast as you can so that they take more damage. In all my time playing the demo, the most reliable way that I was doing this was with the Shield Breaker beta skill, which you actually don't start with by default. You have to unlock it with a skill point. But when you level it up to max, it can almost get rid of a boss enemy's entire shield meter in just about 2 hits. When you drop a shield, it staggers the enemy for a second, and it can let you either finish a combo or get a few more hits in. You can also use an item called a Pulse Grenade that helps with dropping shields, but I personally think the Shield Breaker skill is far and away the best option. The grenade can just help you get that last little bit of shielding down. We're moving on to fall damage, which is the bane of many players' lives. And sometimes when you're exploring in Stellar, you'll get to a high up spot, you'll look down and say, I can make that, only to jump, take fall damage, and die. From the very start of the game, you actually have a way to avoid the fall damage by pressing X right before you hit the ground. Eve will do a little combat roll that absorbs most of the impact, and she recovers fast from it. If you need to practice the timing and spacing of it, you can just sprint while on flat ground, jump, and then time the X button for right before your feet touch the ground, and you'll do the roll. You do have to be sprinting when doing this practice though. For some reason, Eve won't do the roll if you're just walking or jogging, but when she comes out of it, she'll continue the sprint, so it flows really nicely. That combat roll is just a matter of timing, just like the parries and the perfect dodges. And the parries especially can be tricky to time at first. If you're consistently late on the parry, then you just need to hit it a little bit earlier. But if you were like me and consistently early, then try to actually double tap the button. The second tap can initiate the parry and it gets you back on time, and I've even surprised myself with how well it works. If you're not confident with it, then just hold the block and absorb the damage. But if you're feeling bold, try that double tap and you might actually surprise yourself. This works even better if you have the focus boost skill unlocked, which I recommended in that earlier tip. You can boost your parry, you can boost your dodge, and you can even boost the equipment that you wear. The upgrades are absolutely vital in Stellar Blade. All the different gears and exospine types will give you tremendous buffs, so it is worth making sure that your setup is good. You can come up with interesting combos through the gear, like either maxing out your beta energy recharge or doing as much damage as you can through combo attacks. Some of the gear and exospines can even complement each other, and it's pretty fun looking at the stats to figure out what the best options and combinations are. They all cater to different playstyles, so it's not like there's a right setup and a wrong setup. It just comes down to how you want to play the game. You can be hyper offensive, or you can tank up and buff up your defense. There's a bunch of combinations, so take some time to experiment. Experimentation is also what made me figure this next tip out. The Blink and the Repulse are 2 skills that counter lethal attacks, and the game will walk you through them in the beginning. When you get the chance to do a Blink or a Repulse, the enemy and your sword will light up either blue or purple, and you can do the move. But I found out that if you're in the middle of a combo, you can continue your combo until the last possible second that you have to use the ability. As long as you use the ability when your sword lights up, you're good to keep attacking. What I was doing at first, and what I'm sure a lot of you are doing, are just standing there and waiting for the sword to light up, which is fine. That's the safe way to do it. Just know that you can keep doing more damage while your target sets up their lethal, and boom, hit them with the counter when they attack. It makes for a more stylish looking sequence in my opinion too. This next tip is nothing revolutionary, although this movement is usually something that you have to unlock over the course of any other action game like this. But in Stellar Blade, you actually start with it. Eve has a Midair Dodge that gives her a little boost of distance while she's jumping. This isn't one of those 3 I talked about that took me way too long to figure out, but this one did actually take me longer than I care to admit. The first time I did it was on accident during the boss challenge in the demo, And then when playing the demo section, I realized, oh wow, I could have been doing this the entire time. So if there's any ledge or a platform that seems just a little bit out of reach when you jump to it, use this Midair Dodge and you can get a little bit closer. So I talked about the Repulse in the tip before, but this feature escaped me until somebody tipped me off about it in the comments section, so shout out to that viewer. When you pull off a successful Repulse, the enemy gets knocked back and it exposes a weak point briefly, and the enemy will take more damage from specifically ranged attacks if you hit that weak point. If you're at the point in the game where you have the blaster feature for your drone, you can shoot that blob with it, or you can use the Shockwave beta skill for extra damage. Shockwave is considered a ranged attack, so it will do a little something extra to a Repulse target. You might not think it because it's a beta skill, but it is the only option we have in the beginning, so don't avoid it. This next one seems kind of basic, and I guess it's technically a combat tip, even though I'm labeling it exploration, because I have way more combat tips to be honest, so just roll with it. In case you didn't know, you are able to sprint in combat even when you're locked onto a target. It seems very basic actually when I say it, but it's deceptive because other games won't give you this kind of freedom to move around during a lock-on. It's just a nice detail and something good to know moving forward because I have a feeling a lot of players will assume that when they're locked on, they're more stuck in place than they are and they just won't even try to move. I know I did in the beginning, and when I realized I could actually sprint and move freely, it opened up a lot more doors. I touched on grenades very briefly with the shield breaker tip, but don't ignore your items. There are a plethora of potions, grenades, and other items that can help you out in a fight and in the field. It's really easy to default to the sword and the beta and burst skills, but the grenades and potions all have a purpose too. These aren't the kind of nades that you would throw in Call of Duty or something. These are kind of an area of effect item that you drop at your feet, and if the enemy is in range, they'll get hit. The pulse grenade is pretty nice for dropping shields, like I mentioned earlier. There's also a shock grenade to stun the Natibas, and all the different potions are suited for different approaches to combat. You've got your basic tumbler, a stronger instant heal potion, and steady healing over a set period of time. Try them all out and see which ones you like best. We're now down to the last 3 tips, and these are the ones that took me way too long to figure out on my own and pretty much blew my mind when I realized it was a thing. If you find value in these or any of the other tips in this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up button to let me know. And if you have any tips of your own to help out players, drop them in a comment. Knowledge is power, and in this community, we are powerful. Just like this next tip, and this is probably my favorite one in the entire video. So it's deceptive. Eve's hitbox on her character model seems to follow her animation's movement, not her actual position. For example, if there's a part of your basic attacking combo that makes her jump in the air, she can actually avoid an enemy's low sweeping attack if she jumps at the same time. It's really nice attention to detail because most games would still have you get hit because that's your position. Does that make sense? Like, the animation is carrying Eve's hitbox up and over the low sweeping attack and she'll avoid the damage, whereas other games the hitbox would just stay there. Even though the character is jumping, the hitbox doesn't, so you still get hit. It's just some next level game development and I appreciate it. Very similarly, in this second to last tip, you can actually dodge enemy attacks without actually hitting the dodge button. Just like how a boxer can slip and roll punches, you can slip oncoming attacks in this game. As long as they're straight down the middle, you can just move laterally to one side or the other, and it will completely miss you. Especially with some of these weaker enemies like the creepers, you can just keep dancing around the attacks. It's kind of crazy. You can just slip it off to the side, or just like in the last tip, if it's a low sweeping attack, you can jump over it and still avoid the hit. This one will take a lot more knowledge about the enemy's attack patterns because you have to know which attack is coming at you, but it's still fun to do. This last tip is all about visibility, and like I said, this one took me forever to figure out. I didn't play with this setting when I went through the demo, but once I found out it was possible, it was kind of hard to go back from it. In the accessibility section, there's a setting called High Contrast. It's under Visual Assistance. There's 3 different presets, and what this does is it illuminates all of the important objects in the world, including Eve, the drone, any objects that you can destroy or interact with, climbable objects, and of course the enemies themselves. I know a lot of the other maps in this game will be more vivid and vibrant, especially when compared to this demo map, which is very dark by its nature. Turning on this setting makes everything so much easier to see, and it takes out a lot of the guesswork in what you can and can't interact with. My only issue with it is that it's a little bit immersion breaking, but preset 1 does make Eve look like a bit of a ghost, so I guess that's kind of cool. But with that, guys, those are 20 essential tips that you need to know going into Stellar Blade. I hope this was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like, drop a comment below if you've got any of your own tips. If I get enough of those, I might do a second video with just community tips, so that could be pretty fun. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. Shout out to all the channel members who continue to support the channel. Duft Curse Hanover, Scoots McGee, Isaac S, Viljalmer, Minodam8, Zeta Ann, and Brian James. Thank you all so much for continuing to support my work. Consider subscribing to the channel if you're new, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.